Hello and welcome everyone, we Weeb online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Naruto and Female Kurama Stuck on an Island, Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Where in the world was he? Naruto could feel the warm, grainy sand beneath him and hear the waves coming in softly a few feet to his right and birds chirping in the distance. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the sun was just about to go down. As it started to go down, it turned the blue sky his favorite color, which is orange. He had all these clues, but he didn't realize he was on a beach until he picked up some sand in his hand. A beach. He trailed off quietly before turning his head to look out at the water. What the hell am I doing? How in the world did he get here? Where did this place come from? He stood still for a few minutes, trying to remember what had happened. But he couldn't remember anything. The last thing he could remember was walking through a thick forest with his team. So, unless he just appeared on a beach out of nowhere, something must have happened. He only had to decide what. Maybe he was just fooled, or maybe he was just having a very real dream. He really hoped it was the second one. He slowly got up and stood up straight, groaning softly because his body was so stiff. He rubbed some of the coarse sand off the back of his head and neck, then looked around to try to figure out where he was. He was on what he would call a typical island where people end up when they get lost or something. Even though he hadn't read many books in his life, he knew that at least. He saw tall perennial plants with long, hard stems that reminded him of shrubs. Below them, he saw a group of real shrubs that looked like a low fence that kept people from entering what he thought was a jungle, or a wood, or anything. There were a lot of mountains in the back, way in the middle of the island. They were so tall that, from where he was sitting, he was sure that clouds would cover the tops of those mountains if there were clouds in the sky. Overall, the island he ended up on was both beautiful and scary. There is a lot of beautiful green, huge structures, and dangerous mystery. Okay, island. I'm on some freaking island in the middle of nowhere, he said quietly at first. With each word he said, his voice got louder, and the corners of his mouth turned down as he spoke. Well, isn't this great? Either I'll get eaten by something or I'll be here alone for the rest of my life. Monkey, shut up. Naruto blinked once and said, huh, as he turned his head to see where the other voice was coming from. When he saw the person sleeping next to him, he was surprised. The first thing he saw was something orange. She had smooth, orange hair that reached her chin. It looked like the sky just before the sun started to go down. It looked like it was rich and smooth. Even though she was beautiful, he wasn't thinking about her hair. His attention was really on the two long ears that came out of the sides of her head like a fox's. In his short life, he had seen a lot of strange things, like people with horns and tails. But he had never seen anyone with animal ears. Who was this girl, anyway? He leaned closer to her as she pursed her lips so he could see her face better. She was very pretty, incredibly cute. Her face was in the shape of a heart, with soft cheeks that went down a thin jawline to a thin chin. She had a cute, small nose that was slightly curved up near the tip. This made her look almost bratty or snooty. Her lips were below that. They were soft, round, and just a little bit wet, so they had a tiny bit of a shine in the light. When he first saw her, he thought she was cute, but now that he has had a good look at her, he would call her a beauty, not a cutie. He looked down farther, but stopped when he saw that she was completely naked. What he did see, he would say that she had curves. Curvy and short. Short, tanned, and curvy. All of that was so much that he got red in the face. Nope, naked girl. We all remember the last time I ended up peeping, he whispered to himself, shivering a little as he thought about the time he fell into a woman's bath at an onsen and ended up peeping. He turned away and went to take off his jacket. After brushing the sand off the back, he put it over her. Even though his jacket covered her from the top of her chest to her hips, he could still see her slim shoulders, thick thighs, and beautiful calves. We hoped that she wouldn't get cold. He gave a small sigh and turned his head to watch the sun go down. Well, I guess I'll at least have someone to talk to here, he said softly, trying not to wake up the girl next to him. Well, when that person wakes up. When he looked back at the girl, he saw that she was sleeping with her head on his blanket. Even though he didn't know why, that made him smile. He was pretty sure by now that he wasn't being tricked, so he would have to stay on this island until someone came to save him. It would have been awful to do that by yourself, but it could have been done with someone else.
Even though he didn't know how he got to this island in the first place, he decided it no longer mattered.
Now, his only goal was to stay alive. He wanted to go out and see the world while he still could. But he knew that leaving this girl alone on the beach would be a very bad idea. So, even though he wanted things like firewood, he chose to stay. After waiting for a while, though. Eesh, this is so boring, Naruto said as he sat there with his eyes a bit narrowed. He hated being by himself with his thoughts. They were rarely as positive as the person he seemed to be on the outside. Even so, that didn't mean he wasn't an optimistic person. He just couldn't stop bad thoughts from coming into his head whenever he was alone. Right now, he was having bad thoughts about all the good things he would miss now that he was on an island, like tasty ramen, sleeping in a bed, and taking a hot shower. Also, there were the people he would miss. People like Kakashi, Sakura, Choji, and Shikamaru, Tuchai, Tu, and I am. Also Tsunade and Jiraiya. He would miss a lot of people, that was true. Even though he had only been awake for an hour or two, he missed them so much that he started writing their names in the sand. About the 5th or 6th time he wrote Kakashi, the girl next to him started to move. When he turned his head to look at her again, he noticed how her ears seemed to move and twitch as she woke up. This, along with the way her face was a little scrunched up, made her look very cute. He was able to see her face well when she was sleeping, but he didn't get a chance to see what color her eyes were. She was finally starting to wake up, so he would get to see them. When she finally opened them, he could see that they were a pretty red. He parted his lips to greet her as she looked up at the sky. Okay, then, get up and she. Oi, can it, monkey, she said rudely and groggily as she woke up and swatted her hand in his direction. Then she yawned loudly. I would have liked to hear something other than your voice first thing in the morning. He quickly opened his eyes wide and then slowly moved back. I would know that superior tone anywhere. You'd better. I didn't spend all those damn years stuck inside your weak body just to be forgotten in an instant, she said, tossing his jacket to the side as she stood up and showing herself to him without shame. Yuck, it's disgusting that you put your dirty, itchy jacket on top of me while I was sleeping. For a moment, he couldn't think of anything coherent to say, so he just blurted out the first thing that came to mind. But it took him a while. As he stood there awkwardly, she looked back at him. But her eyes were so cold that he thought they were the reason he was freezing. Are you just going to keep looking at me or what? I just can't believe. She wrinkled her brow and asked, can't believe what? You're a girl. At his comment, she frowned and her cheeks turned just a little bit red against her will. Or did this boy get the idea to say such a thing to her? She is the most powerful nine-tailed fox. She stood up and took a step toward him as she let out a low growl. She snarled as she looked at him with such anger and hatred in her eyes that, if she had been stronger, her look would have set him on fire and turned him into ash. Did it really take your primitive brain that long to figure it out, or were you so shocked that you had to say it out loud? Are you monkeys that stupid? But, no, I just didn't think you were a girl, he said, his voice getting louder as he spoke. And why is that? She asked him in a threatening tone, cutting him off as she stomped toward him with her fists clenched. It won't matter much to you or me if you're a girl or not after I rip your head off. Naruto jerked back. I just didn't think it would happen. I didn't think the nine-tailed fox could go from being well, the nine-tailed fox to being well. Complete your thought, monkey. Well, he stopped talking as he tried to get a little more brave. I just didn't expect to see you as a naked girl, especially a naked girl so. Well, she kicked some sand at him with enough force that when the grains hit his chest, they hurt a lot. GRR, I told you to finish your damned sentence. You're lucky I haven't already gutted you for wasting my time. Fine. Beautiful. There, I said it. I didn't expect you to be so beautiful, he said, closing his eyes and turning his head away as he waited for his horrible death. But that horrible death did not happen. No heads were ripped off and he wasn't cut open. At least, not fast enough to keep him from opening his eyes and looking back at her. Her legs were now turned in so far that the insides of her knees touched, and she seemed much less haughty and superior than before. Her cheeks were a little red, and the tips of her ears were bent down. He couldn't believe that the demon he had known all his life as a giant fox that destroyed villages could strike such a cute pose. There was a lot to think about, but those things could wait. Huh?
You think I'm pretty? She asked, pausing before she said the last word and looking into his eyes with a doubtful look on her face.
He quickly shook his head yes, definitely. Well, of course I'm beautiful. I am the elegant nine-tailed fox, after all, she said softly, quickly regaining her composure as she kept looking at him with her red eyes, trying to see if there was any hint of lying in what he said. Maybe I'll let you live since you used what you thought were your last words to praise me. At least for now. If I killed you, I'd have nothing to do on this island. So think of yourself as lucky, monkey. After she was done talking, she gave him a big smile. If he didn't know who she was at the time, he would have been flattered that such a beautiful girl would say that to him instead of suspicious. Well, it's better than getting my head cut off. Most mortals would agree with you, she said with a smirk, sticking her tongue out and turning to face the ocean. I can't believe I made it all the way out here by myself. Maybe I put too much effort into my escape. Naruto pursed his lips and then slowly pulled them apart.
How did you get away?
She turned her head to look at him, and the slight twist in her body made her toned back arch just enough to show off a certain curve. He wasn't sure if the nine-tailed fox cared about being modest, but he was sure that the demon fox, who was now a girl, would be very upset if he stared at her. Still, no matter how hard he tried to keep his eyes on her, he couldn't help but look down for a split second, which, to his surprise, made her laugh out loud. She gave him a smirk and said, "Wouldn't you like to know? There are a lot of things I want to know right now," he began hesitantly, being careful with his words so as not to anger the demon he had just calmed down by calling her beautiful. She raised one eyebrow, and, "Monkey, do you think I'm going to answer your questions? I wouldn't say I expect you to, but I would like you to," he said with a shrug, then slowly walked over to where his jacket had been thrown. "Shouldn't you be more worried about your own survival than about asking me stupid questions? Why don't you just do monkey things like burn some wood for warmth or something? I guess you could say I have a burning curiosity," he said with some hesitation as he put on his jacket. The look he got wasn't so much one of amusement as it was one of boredom. Naruto asked. "Well, what can I do in exchange for some questions?" Before she turned to face him, she crossed her arms in front of her chest. As she walked toward him, she softly hummed. When they were about a foot apart, she stopped. From this far away, he could tell that she was shorter than him, maybe about an inch. He had completely forgotten about that. Maybe it was because he was too scared to think when she had earlier said she would tear him apart. "Anyways, I want head pats and belly rubs, too." He blinked. "What? Do I have to say it again and again to get through your thick head, monkey?" she asked with a pout. "No, I heard what you said, but I'm just a little." "Well, I was surprised. I thought you were going to ask me to swear an oath to you or give you my life or something," Naruto said as he scratched the back of his head and smiled at her. "And why would you be surprised? Your life is already mine. Do you think that because I'm so great I can't enjoy simple things like head pats and belly rubs?" Naruto gave a head shake. "No, I'm not thinking so much as I'm just surprised. Really. Foot massages. I've decided to add foot massages to my list of demands. Massages in general." "So," he asked, "how many questions? You know, for all that, a 30-minute session of one of those services gets you one answer to a question you have for me," she said, letting her arms fall back to her sides. This made him tilt his head just a little bit up so he wouldn't get an inappropriate look at her big chest. "But I can ask you to ask a different question if I don't want to answer the one you ask me." He thought about what she said for a moment before shaking his head. "Well, it looks like that's the best deal I can get." "It is." He spoke up after a moment of silence. "So, do you want all of that right now? If I were a human monkey like you, I'd be more worried about finding shelter," she said, looking up at the moon, which had risen while they were talking, and then back up again. "You might be able to handle it now, but it's only going to get colder and colder until you're shivering against a tree like a poor mouse." He let out a soft sigh and then turned to look at the line of trees behind him. "That's a little too late now. Maybe you could have made something by now if you hadn't spent so much time staring at me in your sleep." "I didn't stare at you," he yelled, turning his head back to her and putting his hands up in defense. "I woke up about an hour or so before you did, and I put my jacket over you," she grumbled in a low voice. "That stinky, dirty, and itchy jacket of yours." Naruto quickly replied, "I can't imagine you smelling any better." He jerked a little as he realized what he had just said. "You did snuggle up against it." She raised an eyebrow and gave him a curious look. "Oh?" He decided to stay quiet. "So you think I smell bad, she asked, moving closer to him and tilting her head to the side so she could look into his eyes. "Did you just say that?" Naruto took a quiet swallow and then slowly nodded his head. "Yes, I could kill you where you stand, but that would be a waste," she said after a second pause. She looked up at him with a furrowed brow. "Think of this as a favor, you dirty monkey. And here I was thinking you'd make me smell you or something." She laughed at him and let out a snort. "I hope." "Yeah, no." Naruto's answer was cut off by a gust of cold wind that made him shiver. "Well, it's getting colder, so I guess you were right." "I'm always right," she said with confidence, snorting again, this time with a lot more laughter than the first time. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "Right. I guess I'll do like a little mouse and find a tree to hide behind. If you are naked, why aren't you cold?" She gave him one more smirk, put her hands on her hips, and proudly puffed out her chest. "In this form, I may look like one of your monkey women, but I am far better than them in every way." The cold doesn't bother me at all. Lucky you. Yes, I'm lucky, but you're not, she told him. Instead of standing here, why don't you go get some wood to make a fire? She asked, leaning slightly toward him as she spoke. He gave a shoulder shrug. Would you be willing to help me? What? And let myself be forced to chop down trees like a monkey worker? Naruto made a pouty face. He could try to compliment her again. Maybe it would work the same way it did the last time he told her she was beautiful. She really did have a lot of pride, after all. Man, if this worked, it would save him a lot of trouble in the long run. After taking a deep breath, he decided to try. But you could do it much better than I could. Well, of course I'd do it better. I am the magnificent nine-tailed fox, after all, she said, putting her hand on her chest and tilting her head up in a proud way. It's no big deal for me to cut down trees. I just walk around in my fox form and do it. He asked, why are you in this form anyway? She told him with a straight face and narrowed eyes, none of your business. He said to himself, nice try, before he said something back to her. So, are you going to show how great you are, or are you just going to stand there? Oh, you don't believe me, do you? You don't think the scary nine-tailed fox can bring down a tree? HMPH. Just watch me, monkey. Let me show you some of my power so you know to respect me, she said as she stomped over to the nearest tree. The tree she chose was about 10 times taller than she was, and the stump was so thick that she could probably fit inside it if it were hollowed out. She turned her head back to look at him after stretching out her shoulders a bit. She asked him, are you watching? He called out to her again. I am. She yelled back, you'd better be, and then kicked the stump of the tree hard. Hiya. Her leg went through the stump so quickly that it looked like it went from one side to the other by magic. He might have been making it up, but it seemed to him that a gap had just opened up between the stump and the rest of the tree. Before the tree fell over, the nine-tailed fox picked it up and carried it back to him. He thought for a moment that she was going to use it to hit him in the head, but she didn't. Instead, he watched as she used her small, delicate hands to crush it into pieces about the size of campfire logs. Everything seemed so strange that he didn't know what to think. Wow, aren't you just amazed, monkey? She asked, the corners of her mouth turning up into a smile. Even in this weak form, I have more than enough power to break a tree apart. That was pretty cool, he said as he walked up and picked up one of the pieces of wood, nodding his head. I'm so glad you chose a tree instead of me to do that too. Going around and gathering enough wood to make a good fire. He set everything up for them. When he went on missions with his team, he wasn't the one who made the fire, but he had seen it done enough times to be able to do it himself. His team didn't make him do it, which was good because he had already forgotten almost all of the boring survival skills he had learned in the academy. But before he started the fire, he noticed that his fellow stranded person hadn't spoken in a while. This made him look up at her. HMPH. She made a face. Naruto's eyebrows raised. What? She narrowed her eyes and put her hands on her hips as she walked toward him. I think I deserve something for saving you the trouble of having to collect wood on your own. Do you want me to pat your head? He asked uncertainly. She gave him a smirk and leaned her head forward a little. Oh, good. And here I was afraid I'd have to explain it to you. To think that he would be stuck on an island with a beautiful naked girl who turned out to be the nine-tailed fox was crazy. Who just happened to want him to pet her head and rub her belly. He thought for a split second that he was in a bad movie or something. But that thought went away quickly as he awkwardly put his hand on her head. She said, and smiled a little as he began to pat her head. One of the few things your monkey hands can do is pat your head. I would hope they are at least good for something, he said, moving his hand ever so slightly toward one of her ears so he could start scratching at the base of it. Her response came right away. She jerked back as soon as she rubbed her thumb against the base of her ear, as if the stimulation was too much for her. Even though she could have cried out or squealed, she just bit her bottom lip. Oh, the ear technique. He blinked. Here, technique. Yes, so, you like it better this way? He asked as he put his hands on her ears and massaged them. Her legs really gave out. Ah, yes, that's it. I'm so glad I didn't kill you. I'm glad you didn't also kill me. Oh, shut up, you fool. This was really weird. From being a cool, killer queen, she became. No matter what this was. Okay. How long do you want me to keep doing this? An hour perhaps. Wait, an hour. I thought we had agreed on half an hour. That was for the questions, monkey. This is to help you with the tree. Ugh. All right. Of course, I'm the nine-tailed fox, so of course. He shook his head. Right. How much time had passed? Not really that long. He had been on the island for only 3 days at this point. But those 3 days had been hard. He had used them to build a simple shelter out of sticks and leaves, look for food and water, and take care of his island friend. See, the first 3 things on the list weren't actually that hard to do. On the other hand, entertaining the 9-tailed fox was like walking through a burning field with your eyes closed. No matter what he did, it seemed like he would get burned. Sometimes to the letter. He seemed to still have his crazy ability to heal very quickly, which was a relief. In all honesty, keeping up with her was making him more tired than staying alive. Yes, she was sometimes cold, often rude, and sometimes made threats against him. But there was something else that bothered him, something to be ashamed of. He really wanted something to not be a problem. The body was hers. In particular, the fact that it was naked. In a sense, naked. Not only that, but he was almost certain that she did it on purpose whenever she showed off a certain part of her body, like her breasts or her rear. What the heck was he supposed to do besides force himself to look away? He was lucky that, other than the first time she said he was ogling her while she slept, she had never insulted him for looking at her. He didn't know if that meant she was okay with him looking or if she hadn't noticed. All he knew was that it was a problem that she wasn't wearing clothes. He needed to do something. He had never imagined that one day, his goal would be to get a girl to put on clothes instead of taking them off. Life was sometimes strange. How, though, would he do it? He let out a soft sigh and decided that he probably wouldn't have an idea anytime soon. So instead of worrying about it, he decided to have fun and take a bath in one of the deeper parts of the river he found near the beach. During the day, the water was warm, and he could see all the beautiful flowers and trees around him. This made bathing on the island a very pleasant experience. But that wasn't all. Another thing that made it so nice was that he was by himself. The 9-tailed fox never went with him because it liked to take a bath at different times. Aside from when he was sleeping or taking a bath, he spent most of his time with her. It wasn't a bad thing to be with her, but it wasn't a great thing either. Even though she killed a lot of people in his village and he held her inside of him for a while, they were supposed to hate each other, but he wished they could just get along. Even if she didn't insult him or call him a monkey for 10 minutes, he would be happy. Why did she call him a monkey in the first place? Despite all the questions he had asked her and all the ways she had avoided answering them over the past 3 days, he had not asked her that. Was it a question that should be asked? He didn't even know her name or how she got out of the seal yet. This whole deal where he helped her out and she dodged or ignored his questions was very unfair. He had had enough of her. When he floated back onto the water, he let most of his body go under. He pursed his lips and closed his eyes as he looked up at the sky and tried to calm down. No matter what he did, he always seemed to be thinking about her. He thought that they would be on this island for a while, so wouldn't it be best if he tried to make friends with her? She may have done terrible, horrible things, but based on what he had seen of her so far, he could say that she was not completely bad. She was sometimes mean, rude, and cold, but she was only nice to him a few times. There might have been hope. He might be able to say yes if he used every bit of optimism he had. Still, he wasn't the type to give up on something before giving it a try. So, he got out of the river and walked over to a nearby flat stone where he had laid out his clothes. He told himself that he would do his best to make friends with her. His clothes were washed in the river. He dried himself off with his jacket instead of a towel before putting on his shirt and pants. He tied the jacket around his waist and took a few steps toward the beach, but he stopped when he thought of something. Something about how she wasn't wearing clothes and how she kept avoiding answering questions. It's possible. At least it was worth a shot. The worst thing that could happen was that she ripped off his head, but he was sure that wouldn't happen. As he walked back to the beach on the path he had made for himself, he stopped just before coming into view. He took a moment to look over at where the 9-tailed fox was while hiding behind some big bushes. She stood next to the water with her back to him. Her short, orange hair moved with the gentle ocean breezes, and so did her ears to a lesser extent. As he watched her, he thought that she looked very stylish. Even though he couldn't see her face, he was pretty sure she had a calm look on her face. She stood there for a few seconds, then sat down and started drawing in the sand. When he wasn't around, it was always interesting to see how she behaved. Even though she was arrogant and out of this world, she had a more human side. He had been watching for too long, so he came out from behind the bushes and cleared his throat loudly enough for her to hear. She quickly erased what she had written in the sand and turned to face him. "Monkey, it was about time you came back. I was going crazy waiting for you." He asked, "Did you wait for me?" "Of course, you're my source of fun on this island, so I'll say yes." He thought it was time to go through with his plan. He replied with a flat, then took a few steps toward her and said, "So, I have a question." "You're going to have to serve me first," she said simply, pointing with her finger to get him to come closer. "Even if I scratch your head or rub your belly, it's not like you're going to answer the questions I'm asking anyway," Naruto said, crossing his arms. She raised an eyebrow and gave a mean grin. Oh, did you get some while you were in the bath? Maybe I did, he said with a wrinkled brow. I'm just sick of you taking advantage of me. If you're going to kill me, you might as well K. The next thing he knew, he was slammed against a tree. The blow surprised him more than anything else and knocked the wind out of him. When the pain finally went away, he opened his eyes and saw that the arm she was using to pin him against the tree was the one she had when she was sealed inside of him. It was so big that she had her long, clawed fingers curled around both him and the tree and was covered in thick fur. You've forgotten your place, monkey, she said harshly as she walked towards him and gave him a cold look. If I wanted to kill you, I would kill you. Since you're still alive, it's clear I don't want to kill you. You can't really keep me alive just so you can pet my head and rub my belly, right? I can keep you alive for any reason I want. She rolled her eyes. And what's the point? It has nothing to do with you. That's how you answer every question. How can you be the legendary nine-tailed fox if you're too scared to answer some stupid questions from a brat? He yelled at her. He watched as her face went from calm to confused. She pursed her lips and looked down at the sand as she thought. It was clear to him that what he had said had made her think. He hoped this would work out for him and that she would change her mind. I hoped she wouldn't kill him by throwing him against a tree. I am the nine-tailed fox of legend. I have no fears. Nothing at all, she said softly after a few moments. Ask your questions, monkey. She finally let him go and changed her arm back to its human form. Okay, he said, rubbing his sore collarbone with his hand and adding, I have a lot of questions. I don't have all day. He made a face. Right, so let's begin with something easy. What are you called? TCH. Starting off by asking the tough questions, she snarled. Why is that such a difficult question? He asked with a raised brow and a slight tilt of the head to the side. Why do you think your monkey texts only talk about me as the nine-tailed fox? My name is sacred, and I only give it to people who deserve it or who I consider to be on the same level as me, she said, putting a closed fist on her chest over her heart. I will answer any other question. I will not give you my name at all. Naruto waited a moment before he let out a sigh and said, fine. Then I'll ask you something else. Why do you say that people are monkeys? She looked confused and blinked. Because all of you are monkeys. That's all there is to it. But how? People and monkeys are very different from each other. Consider this. Do monkeys eat bananas? He said. He nodded his head. Yeah, because people also eat bananas. Monkeys and people are the same. But, he said, a lot of animals eat bananas. She groaned and said, okay, then here's another. How about their hands? They do, Naruto said, and the corners of his lips turned up just a little as he started to find this whole thing funny. People also have hands, so monkeys and people are the same, she said, nodding her head in agreement. You both have 5 fingers on each hand, too. There's no getting around it. Don't fight over it. Alright, I guess I'm a monkey then, he said in a sarcastic tone. She snapped her fingers and gave him a thumbs up. There you go, she said. Now you understand. So, if I'm a monkey, doesn't that make you a monkey too, since you're in that form? He asked. She gave him an angry look right away. No, you little brat, not at all. I'm a lot better than you. Remember, you're right. He rolled his eyes as he said, vastly better. She sighed and said, you really don't respect your elders or your people in charge. Everyone says that about me. Why are you even in that shape? Because I want to, she said in a quiet voice. He hummed to himself when she gave a boring answer. It was so different from the others that he was sure it was a lie, but he decided not to say anything about it for now. Maybe he would talk to her about it later. Okay, then. Anyways, I have more questions. A more important question, he said with a shrug and a hand slowly raised to his stomach. How did you get away from the seal? You look at me like you expect me to give you a long, complicated, and deep answer, she said with a smirk as she walked towards him. But the way I broke the seal was that I made myself leave. Yes, anticlimactic. I know. However, I thought that the sealed, she replied with a shrug. So, you made yourself leave. You think I spent all those years inside of you just counting the hairs on my tails. From the first day, I tried to figure out how to get away. It just so happened that I finally figured out the code while you and she said, monkey squad. So, is that why you wouldn't tell me? Naruto puckered his lips. Because I'd get disappointed. TCH. As if. She crossed her arms and said, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to. But now you do. She said, yes, I've decided to answer your questions. Before he spoke again, there was a moment of silence. Why do you want to keep me alive? Since I want to. I really don't know why you're looking into it so much. I am an immortal, infinitely better being. And I don't want to kill you because it would be boring. I've told you many times that you are the only thing that makes me happy on this island. Why don't you just leave this island? he asked. After he asked her that, she bit her bottom lip and let out a huff. After gritting her teeth for a second, she turned away from him and whispered something under her breath. Seeing her like this made him raise an eyebrow and lean in to hear what she was saying. When she saw him lean in, she let out a low growl and swatted her hand at him to stop him from getting closer. Oi, she was annoyed and said, I was getting ready to answer your stupid question. I can't leave this damned island because I'm stuck here. Oh, why does it happen? Well, could it be because you don't have any tails right now? I see you have fox ears but no tail. Do you agree? He asked, and the way he said it made her take a step back. She was angry. TCH, monkey brains and the fact that they can make such stupidly right guesses. Naruto made a soft hum. I was right, then. Yes, you're correct. Congratulations. Do you want something, like a banana? Do you want me to get down on my knees and worship you because you guessed right? Is that what you want, monkey? She asked as she stomped the rest of the distance between them. What do you want? He asked her after a moment of silence. She was surprised that he answered her question with another question, especially since the question he asked her was so big. What did she want? She wanted a lot of things, but none of them seemed like a good answer to his question. She took a step back and looked at the sand while she thought. When the silence got too uncomfortable, she had to force herself to answer. I'm not sure. Naruto hummed, then pointed to his shelter behind her and said, why don't I ask you more questions there? I want to find a place to sit down. I have a few fruits that I found this morning. You're welcome to some. Like I need your permission to eat your fruit. She rolled her eyes. But when he started walking, she followed him anyway. It would still be nice if you asked, he told her with a smile as he let her in first. His shelter was simple, but he was proud of it. He used a bunch of strong sticks and some of the biggest leaves he could find in the jungle to make what was basically a hut. It was big enough for him to stand inside, but only if he stood around the middle. To think that it took him 6 freaking hours. As she walked in, she said, yeah, which was a dismissive answer. When she sat down on the leaf mat he had made, the first thing she did was reach over to the spiraling sphere-carved wooden bowl where he kept the fruit. She picked up a whole bushel of ripe longans and started peeling and eating them right away. As she did this, she looked at him with a smirk on her face. He knew she was making fun of him, but he didn't tell her that. She wiped some sweet fruit juice off her fingers and then asked, so, what other questions do you have for me? So, when you broke out of the seal, did you use all your power or something? He asked her as he sat down next to her. I did. The process took a long time and used up a little bit of her chakra at a time. If I had used it all up at once, I would have alerted the seal, and it would have used whatever countermeasures its creator had put in it to trap me even more tightly, she said with a quiet sigh as she started peeling some of the longans so she could eat more of the sweet fruit later. Is that why I'm still carrying the seal? She nodded her head and said, I'd guess so. How much chakra did you use, then? Will your tails grow back? He asked. A lot. Certainly. They will get bigger again. One tail after another. Maybe then I'll be able to get off this stinky island, she said, nodding her head twice as she answered both of his questions. He said, I hope you take me with you. She laughed and said, that will depend on whether or not I find you interesting enough to be worth my time. Naruto smiled and said, I think I'm doing a pretty good job of it. You haven't threatened to kill me in over an hour. I'm improving. Maybe you are, she said. When she was done peeling about 8 of the longans, she put them all in her mouth and spat out the stones into another bowl. What's the fruit like? She gave a shrug and said, sweet and soft. But there's too much work. I like apples much better. So, are apples your favorite fruit? He asked. Yes, she said with a nod of the head. He softly hummed, what's your favorite color? Blue. Food. Honey. Season. Spring. What is with these simple questions? I'm just trying to get to know you, he answered, reaching over to pick up a longan for himself. I might as well, right? We'll be on this island together for a while. Not many mortals do that. Get to know me, I mean, she said with a sigh as she briefly closed her eyes. Half the time, they don't even get to know each other. Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked, would you like me to learn more about you? He sighed to himself about how strange his question was. I wouldn't mind. She trailed off as she picked up all the longan peels and put them in the bowl with the stones. Oh, so that's that. It will be fun to learn more about the 9-tailed fox, he told her, and his excitement made her blush. Ask a while, she stopped talking and took a few seconds to think before continuing. I lied to you earlier. That wasn't right for a person like me. The real reason I'm in this shape is that. It is my starting point. The shape I take when my chakra is low. I dislike it. Naruto moved closer to her and asked, why? Because it's so small and fragile. It's been a long time since I've seen myself like this. I don't remember how weak I can be. And without my fur, I feel naked. Cursed hairless monkey form. she said, and then her face turned sad as she finished. Swallowing quietly, he decided to be brave and put his hand on her shoulder. It was warmer than he had expected, and her lightly tanned skin was as soft and smooth there as it was on every other part of her body he had touched so far. In fact, if he hadn't been trying to comfort her, he would have stopped to admire it and every other part of her. She didn't pull away, which surprised him. He was so shocked by the fact that she let him touch her without her permission that he almost forgot to say anything. Luckily, he remembered before things got awkward. Look, you're neither weak nor small, and you are not at all weak. Even though you look like this, you are still the famous nine-tailed fox. TCH. Being comforted by a monkey brat, she said, though her face betrayed the harshness of her words with a small smile. To think I've already fallen this low. Naruto smiled back and put his hand on her shoulder before taking it away and saying, well, I'm glad it worked. If it hadn't worked out, I would have cut off your arm. He shuddered. Thank God that worked. You should thank me instead, she said with a soft laugh. Right, thank you, nine-tailed fox, he said. Then he reached over and scratched her right at the base of one ear, which made her purr softly and happily. Yes, more thanks. Ha, Naruto said, slowly pulling his hand away because her reactions were getting too intense for him. I'll scratch your ears more later. She let out a sad coo when he stopped scratching her, and her ears kept twitching until she put her hands on them. She said with a soft pout, you'd better. I will. Don't worry, he said, giving her a friendly smile. Alright. So, do you have any more questions for me? Naruto nodded. I do actually. Since you feel like you have nothing on, why don't you put on clothes? Clothes? She raised her eyebrow. Do you like what you're wearing? Sure, I guess. Clothes. She trailed off slowly, then pursed her lips and looked down at the ground. If I wore them, I'm sure I'd be more fashionable than you. He laughed and said, prove it. She said, fine, and then she closed her eyes. He thought she was going to go into the jungle to make clothes out of the leaves and vines, so he was surprised when her body started to glow red with her demonic chakra. After a few moments, soft shapes started to form over her, and when the glow went away, she was wearing clothes. They were nice clothes, too, not like the dirty clothes he was wearing. Damn, did she look sexier now that she was wearing clothes, or was it just him? The way her shorts were just tight enough to show off her meaty thighs and wide hips. He couldn't see her back from where he was sitting, but he was sure it would have been great to look at as well. The top she chose was also great. It showed off her slim shoulders and made her already prominent bust stand out even more. The blue went well with her orange hair and white shorts. Help, he was going to start drooling or something if he looked at her for one more second. So, he started awkwardly, forcing himself to look into her eyes. You can make clothes. I can make a lot of things, she said with a shrug. It's just a matter of moving the chakras. How about that? He asked. Perfect chakra control, she simply said, then looked down at herself and back up at him. How do I look? Still beautiful. Yes, Naruto said with a nod. Definitely. Good, she said with a smile that made her cheeks flush. You do have better style than me, he said, tugging at the bottom of his shirt. Better than most, actually. Of course, she said with a haughty air, puffed out chest. But what made you choose that? He tilted his head to the side and asked. She shrugged. Well, that monkey girl with pink hair that you seem to like always wore tops with no sleeves. I just think that's what's in style. The briefs. I saw a pair like them right before I went inside you. Monkey with pink hair. You mean Sakura, she said. I didn't care enough to remember her name. And pink-haired monkey is a good name for her anyway. I wouldn't say that. Naruto shook his head. She is kind and caring. She is a nice person. How would you describe yourself? He made a soft hum. I feel like I can't say that I'm a good person. I don't know if I'm a good person or not. Only someone else can tell me that, he said, shrugging his shoulders. She cocked her head and said, what a answer that is surprisingly wise. I was wrong about you, monkey. Everyone does that, he said with a smile. She smiled back. Even though she didn't want to, she couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. It was contagious, so dangerously contagious. Damn this brat for being so hard to get mad at. If she wasn't careful, she might end up getting attached to him. Yes, well, that's why you always manage to stay alive when you meet ninjas who are better than you, she said. Are they really better than me, though, if they didn't take me seriously? She said, maybe not, but if they had thought you were a threat, they would have kicked your behind. However, you wouldn't have let them do that. You would have helped me a little bit, Naruto said. She made a pouty face and said, I might have. Probably at the last minute. I really would have liked to see you get beat up. Rude. Not right now. He cocked his head. Though, she said with a smirk, if anyone is going to beat you up now, it will be me. I'll take that as a compliment, she said. She laughed and then gave him a smile. Good. Then she hit him in the arm with a good punch. He winced right away and said, "Ouch. Why did you do that?" "Because you touched me without asking." In the end, it still worked out. Yeah. She then turned away and blushed, which made him lean toward her to see what was going on. "Thanks anyway." Naruto, had he been shocked? When she called him by name, he and she were both surprised. But for a second after she said it, she didn't realize it. When she did, her face turned red and she left right away. He didn't follow her. One look at her confused face told him that she needed some time alone to think. Maybe he did, too. Now that the sun had set and the moon had taken its place in the sky, Naruto had already made a fire and eaten his dinner. She was sitting close to the water with her legs bent so that her knees were pressing against her chest. The waves would roll in gently, sometimes getting far enough that her feet would get wet. She didn't seem to mind, though, because she didn't move an inch. Naruto tried not to stare, but he couldn't help but give her the occasional worried look. He knew she saw him because her ears would twitch ever so slightly whenever he did.
She didn't say anything, though, so he didn't know if that meant she didn't mind or just didn't have the energy to tell him off.
After she told him so much, he found that he liked being with her more than being alone, and that he wanted to hear her voice more than this oppressive silence. It was a sudden change for him, but he was okay with it. He thought they were on their way to becoming friends, even though things looked a little rough right now. When he turned around and looked at her again, he decided he needed something to break the ice between them. Since he now knew that her favorite fruit was apples, he thought he might go into the jungle and pick some for her. He had seen apples in the morning when he was picking the longans, but he didn't pick them because the idea of eating exotic jungle fruit instead of apples was much more exciting to him. Even though it was dark, he was sure he could help her. "Okay," he said quietly to himself, then turned toward her and called out, "I'm going to go spend some time in the jungle." She did not say anything back to him, but she did nod. That was enough for him to know that she had at least acknowledged his words. Tying his jacket around his waist, he gave her one last look before walking into the thick jungle brush. About 15 minutes into his journey, he noticed something. It seemed to him, as he hacked at some of the obstructing foliage with his kunai, that no matter how many times he had cut paths into the jungle, he always had to do it again. It was like he was in some sacred grove that would regrow every single night as if enchanted with magic or something. He was as scared of it as he was inspired by it. Eventually all the trees melded into one, but he remained confident that he would be able to get to where he had seen the apple trees. Being from a part of the world full of dense forests helped to ease his mind as he traversed this one. Still, all that time spent exploring forests didn't prepare him at all for the next step he took that made the ground click. "Huh?" He let out, then stopped right away. He quickly jumped back as he tried to figure out what had made that click. He did so just in time to avoid the explosion as the earth where he had stepped erupted in a flurry of dirt, rock, wood, and bits of metal. The explosion was small, but it was strong enough to throw him into a tree and cover his face and arms with soot and other powders. After a moment, Naruto groaned, "Ugh, what the hell was that?" When the pain finally hit, he raised a hand to his bruised chest and groaned again. That was where he had been hurt the most by the explosion. He was glad to find that none of the shrapnel had gotten inside of him and that nothing was broken. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Phew, they could have gone a lot worse." If he had been any slower on that jump, his legs would have been blown right off. He would have ended up a double amputee. No amount of his superior healing factor was going to fix that. Getting up, he brushed off the front of his shirt and walked over to the crater to inspect what remained of the trap. There was not much left, just some bits of metal. Just what was that? He had not noticed any chakra signatures that would have alerted him of explosive seals, so that meant that the bomb he had stepped on was purely mechanical. Was this island just filled with random explosive traps or something? If it was, just how many more would he have to worry about? To think that he would have to deal with this on a trip just to find some apple trees. He was definitely going to have to investigate all of this later. He decided that walking on the ground was too dangerous, so he jumped from tree to tree, just like he did in the forests around Konoha. He finally found the group of apple trees he was looking for and said, "Finally." Gingerly sliding himself down from the branch he was on, he made sure not to walk over another explosive trap as he made his way to the apple tree closest to him. The apples were wonderfully large and marvelously crisp in his hands as he picked them. They were this reddish-pink color that was so vibrant that they glowed in the darkness like round, little red lanterns. Just looking at them was delicious, he thought just before biting into one of them. The skin was somewhat thicker than he had expected, but he thought that it worked amazingly with the actual fruit. The fruit itself was superbly sweet, slightly sour, and terrifically crunchy. If he loved them, when he did not even like apples that much, then she was going to love them too for sure. Picking about half a dozen of them, he carried them by turning his jacket into a sack. Satisfied with the number of apples he had gotten, he then rushed back to the beach. He got back to the beach much faster than he did to find the apple trees because all he had to do was find the path he had made and follow it back. When he finally got back to the beach, he saw that the nine-tailed fox was still sitting by the water. Unlike before, her legs were stretched out toward the water, and she was leaning back with her hands on the sand behind her for support. It looked like she had given up on something. She said quietly, with her eyes on the water, "I heard an explosion when he walked toward her. If you hadn't come back, I would have looked for you." He walked up to her carrying the apples on his shoulder and asked, "Eventually." "Eventually," she said softly, turning her head to look at him. "I would have been worried." "That's a relief," he said, offering her a smile as he made his way next to her and sat down. "I was worried that you didn't care about me." She shut her eyes and made a brow crease. "Don't joke about that." Naruto widened his eyes slight in surprise. "Oh, I thought about things while you were gone," she said slowly as she pulled her legs back and looked at him. "What did you have on your mind?" "About us," she said, pausing for a moment. "I've been through a lot in my long life, but I've never been stuck on an island with a cute monkey kid until I met you. I had no idea I'd end up in a situation like this until I met you." When she said he was cute, he let out a quiet gasp. "Is that something bad?" She gave a head shake. "Yes, but now I don't think so. At first, I wanted to leave, but after we talked, I changed my mind." He asked in a soft voice, "What changed?" "You know, I used to not understand how you were able to make friends so easily. Sometimes, you even made friends with your enemies." She started, changing the subject slightly and pausing to take a breath before continuing. "But now I do." "You mean what?" "You are so bad for me. Like eating too many apples. You are sweet right now but will hurt me in the long run," she said, avoiding the question with a soft sigh. "Speaking of apples, I can smell them on you. Please hand me one." Naruto didn't understand what she was saying at first, but he eventually reached into his jacket and got an apple for her. "Here, thank you." She seemed very deep in thought. He didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. He also didn't understand what she was trying to say, but he did notice that she had asked for an apple instead of just taking one, and that she had thanked him for it. When he saw her take a bite out of the apple, he did the same thing with the one he was already eating. She ate quietly, but he could tell she liked the apple because every time she took a bite, the corners of her lips turned up to make a smile. If he only paid attention to her, he could hear her purring as she got close to finishing her apple. She ate much more quickly than he did. By the time he was halfway done, the only part of her apple that was still there was its core. Before she threw the core into the water, she waited for him to finish. She licked her fingers and said, "That was tasty. This island has some good apples." He gave a little nod. Yeah, they took a moment to enjoy the scene in front of them. The moon was casting its silvery reflection on the water as the gentle waves ebbed and flowed onto the beach. Both day and night, the view was beautiful. It would be easy to get lost in it. But he found himself looking at her more than at the ocean. Even when it was dark, her orange hair was just bright enough to stand out. The dark blue top she wore seemed to blend in with the darkness around her, and the white shorts she wore seemed to blend in with the white sand. This made her face stand out more than anything else. She told him, "You know, if you keep looking at me like that, you might make me blush." And she turned her head to look at him while giving him a smirk. He smiled and didn't feel the least bit bad about being caught staring. "I wouldn't mind. When you blush, you look cute." She laughed out loud, as if, "I think you're really cute when you blush," he said, his words causing her cheeks to flush, which then prompted him to point at her face. "Like that. You look really adorable." From beautiful to cute to adorable. "Is that an improvement or a change for the worse?" she asked, her blush getting worse as he heaped praise on her. "Why can't you be all three?" he asked with his head turned to the side. So, all three. I guess I'm now the pretty, cute, and adorable nine-tailed fox," she said, and as she said each word, the corners of her lips moved up until she finally smiled. Naruto smiled back at her. When she patted him on the head, he liked it when she blushed or scrunched up her face, but he liked her smile the most. After a short pause, he asked, "So, I have a question. What was all that about?" She raised an eyebrow. She pursed her lips. Just by looking at her, Naruto could tell that what she had been thinking about earlier was very important to her. So he didn't say a word while he waited for her to get the courage to answer his question. "I don't have any friends, Naruto," she finally said, pausing before saying his name again. "When I was born, I was old enough to know that making friends with a mortal when I was immortal would only hurt me. So, I never gave them a try. I tried to get along with my fellow tail beasts, but we just couldn't. I grew to dislike them, so I stayed away from them. I can't get away from you now, though." When I heard that explosion, I felt scared, which made me even more sure of this. Against my better judgment, I seem to care for you now. His eyes widened once again at the implications of her words. Before he knew it, he was grinning like crazy, his enthusiasm springing out into his aura, causing her to smile as well despite just pouring out her feelings to him. Gosh, he really was just impossible to be sad or mad around, she thought as she looked at him. Maybe that was why she had grown to like him so much in just a few days. Do you want to ask me what I think you want to ask me? She laughed. You're making me say it, huh? Please put this on the record. He gave me a sly grin. She put her hand up to punch him in the shoulder, but instead she smiled at him. Naruto, I want to be your friend. I'd like to be your friend, too, he said with a smile and a happy sigh. I hope you don't expect me to give you my name yet, she replied, causing him to pout. We've been here for less than a week. I'd hate to give you my name now and then regret it later if you happen to anger me or disappoint me. All right, I won't force you. Good, she said with a smile. She licked her lips after that. Do you have more of those apples with you? He said. He gave a soft laugh and reached into his jacket to get another apple for her. Of course, he said. I was sure you would want more. I don't think one apple would be enough for you. She said, thank you, and took the apple. You're right. When I'm in my fox form, a whole orchard is all I need to eat. The less space it has, the less food it can hold. Well, where does that food go? Are you going to the bathroom or something? Naruto asked. I don't know, she said as she bit into the apple and shrugged her shoulders. It all goes away in the end. That must be helpful, he said as he watched her eat. She nodded her head and said, I guess so. You're right. He turned his head back to look at the moon and said, it's getting late. I wonder what time it is back home. I have no idea. I have no idea what time it is anymore because I spent so much time inside seals, she said with a quiet sigh. I miss the early days, when you monkeys were still small and easy to control, when I could go wherever I wanted and have fun. He looked at her again. Oh, nowadays, I have to live in fear because I'm afraid that some ambitious fool will seal me inside of something. She let out a low, predatory growl. I don't want anything to do with your stupid wars. I only want to be left alone. Every time I've met someone like you, Naruto, it was because they wouldn't leave me alone. Naruto pursed her lips and put a tentative hand on her shoulder. She tensed up at first, but then she started to relax, which made him give her shoulder a soft squeeze. She put her half-eaten apple down on her lap and turned to look at him. There was a vulnerability in her red eyes that made him want to protect her. Not like a sibling or a frenemy. I won't let them put you in a box again. As if they would listen to a dumb brat like you, she said with a quiet snort. Yeah, but, she stopped him and said, I appreciate the thought, Naruto. She gave him a warm smile as she slowly put her hand on top of his on her shoulder. She kept talking and said, I really do. Every time we talk, I can tell that you are not lying to me. When you know this, everything you say, more precious to me. I'm glad, he told her, smiling back at her. You know, I never thought I'd become friends with you. Same, she said with a smile. But I'm glad I was wrong. It could just be this island. If we can find a way out of this, maybe it will go away. But I'm going to remember the times I spent with you for a long time, Naruto. He started to lean toward her without realizing it. I'll do the same, until the day I die. You'd better, she said with a smirk. I didn't just say all that much for you to forget me. I'd never forget you. She sighed happily and said, it's getting late. I can tell you are tired, even though you are trying to hide it. I'm sure you were tired after wandering around the forest all night looking for apples. On top of that, there was the bomb, he said. Yes, it's the bomb. She picked up her half-eaten apple, grunted quietly, and slowly stood up. We can worry about the bomb later. You need to sleep right now. He stood up to protest and said, I can stay up a little longer. It's not like I have to get up for anything. You monkeys need to sleep, don't you know? You're still. I think it's growing. Don't baby monkeys need to sleep for at least 8 hours every night? They do. But on this island I can sleep for 8 hours whenever I want to. Well, I want to watch the sun rise with you, Naruto, she said softly, biting her bottom lip afterward. Naruto's eyes got big. Oh, okay then. So I guess I can go to sleep now. Hey, do you ever sleep? Not often. Since I woke up a few days ago, I haven't been able to sleep. Since I'm made of chakra, I don't need to sleep, she said, shrugging her shoulders. But I do like taking a nap every now and then. Would you like to go to sleep tonight? Why? He asked. The shelter has more than enough room. She took a big bite of her apple and shook her head. I wouldn't mind, she said. Throw away the core when you're done eating, he told her. She nodded, and he walked toward his jungle hut, saying, I'd hate for bugs to get in. This house is my last stronghold on this island. She laughed quietly at what he said, then threw the core of her apple into the water and skipped over to him. I'm sure bugs are the last thing on your mind when I'm here. He turned his head just in time to see her smile. I'd rather be with you than with bugs any day of the week. She told him to be quiet and waved her hand at him as she walked toward the shelter. Honest, he yelled. I know, Naruto. You don't have to say that to me. She smiled at him as she walked into the shelter and said, I can tell when you're lying to me. This thing always looks bigger from the outside. Yeah, well, maybe we can work on making it better in the future, Naruto said with a snort. At the moment, this is the best I can do. She gave him another smirk and said, I know. Ish, it's the first time I've ever let a girl spend the night at my house, even if my home is a tent made of leaves and sticks right now. She sat down on the leaf mat and said, this must be a big deal for you. This is the first time I've ever spent the night with a monkey. So I guess we're both new to this. She looked at him and said, anyways, this will do. Not the most comfortable surface I've ever slept on, but better than sand. He took the apples out of his jacket and said, maybe tomorrow I can go out and find more leaves to make the floor a little bit thicker. I'll come with you, she said, laying her head on the floor with a quiet grunt. How are you? Naruto asked as he folded his jacket into a pillow. Hard? You could have this, he said, holding up his jacket. It's not a pillow, but I don't have anything else. Lie down, Naruto. I have a better idea, she said. This made him raise an eyebrow. Oh, he wasn't sure what she had in mind, but he went along with it anyway. He laid down on the floor with his jacket under his head and asked, so, what now? Even though they could see each other's faces because of the moonlight, all they could see of each other in the darkness of their hut was that she had orange hair, and he had blonde hair. When he was lying down, he couldn't see anything, so he had no idea what she was doing. He heard some shuffling and a few quiet breaths as she moved closer to him. Then, he felt something warm press against his stomach. Much better. She put her head on his stomach, and the heat from her cheek made him blush. So, you came up with this? He asked after a moment. She said. It's like killing two birds with one stone, isn't it? You get to say you slept with a girl, and I get a pillow. That isn't really what that means, but alright. Then what does it mean, Naruto? She asked, blinking. He quickly replied, I don't think you want to know. Well, I do now. Are you sure? Yes. He made a pouty face. It's just a euphemism, Naruto said, taking a moment to think of a way to say it so she wouldn't slap him. When boys say they want to sleep with a girl, they mean they want to have sex with her. He closed his eyes and waited for the inevitable smack or slap. It didn't come though. Instead, his answer was met with silence. Blinking, he tilted his head forward to look down at her. With how dark it was, all he could see was the faint orange of her hair and the silhouette of her head. What he couldn't see was the mad blush on her cheeks as she tried her best not to squeak or squeal. She was embarrassed by a lot of what he said. Naruto was the only person who had ever made her blush, and she could count them on one hand. There was something else she felt besides embarrassment. She couldn't put her finger on it, but it felt like a soft, soothing heat was building up inside of her right below where her navel was. What was it? She didn't ask him because she didn't think he would know. Instead, she took a deep breath and parted her lips to tell him what she thought. Oh, yeah, alright. Naruto, I think I'm going to sleep now. Good night. He put his head back on his jacket. Yeah, he said. Good night, Sleep well. With that said, nothing else was for the night as they both soon fell asleep.
I will continue the story in next part, so stay tuned. Till then, we weave offline.